So, I wanted to start off by showing you some striking figures. 50% of all our materials that we extract from the ground are used in buildings, or for buildings. And 50% of all our total energy consumption goes to buildings. You may have heard a slightly lower figure, but then that figure only refers to the use phase of the building, so for heating and cooling, etc. But if we look at the full life cycle of a building, so that would also be then the energy that is needed to extract the material, to actually construct the building, obviously to use it as well, but then at the end of life, the energy that we put into the building then to take it down or whatever. If you look at the full life cycle, then it is actually half of all our energy. A third of our water is being used in buildings directly, and as much as a third of all our generated waste is construction and demolition waste. So those are big numbers. These are general numbers, average numbers for Europe. Even though they are so big, we have estimated that it's less than 1%, rather about 0.5%, I think, of our buildings in Europe that have been assessed for their sustainability performance beyond energy efficiency. So there is clearly a mismatch here. Buildings are consuming lots of resources. They generate waste, but we don't know much about that. So that is why we are doing the work that we are doing, and that's why I'm here today to talk about levels. Because obviously, it's not just about bashing and complaining about buildings. We need the buildings. Buildings have a function of different sorts, and we are highly relying on good buildings. It's just about how do we create them, basically. So today, I will indeed talk about what levels is, what it covers in terms of what kinds of things are we looking at with this tool that we call levels. What do we believe are the benefits of it? And I thought I would give you a little bit of timeline as well. That means looking back a bit, how does this come about, and what are the coming years looking like. And then I also want to say something about the testing of levels. So, I'm used to moving very much, even though I'm Swedish, and I feel very stuck. So if you see me a bit constrained, it's because of, yeah. Anyway, levels is a tool to assess and report on sustainability of buildings, specifically. It covers the full life cycle of buildings. So it means, as I said before, it goes from the extraction of materials, looking at the manufacturing of the construction product, construction, using the building, and end of life. So taking that full aspect into account, going beyond energy efficiency. Levels is focusing on a few indicators. Obviously, there are many global and European certification schemes for sustainable buildings. I know of at least one which is going through DGNB certification, which is a German certification scheme. But we should be aware of that most of those schemes, they are really targeting the best performers. They are typically using quite a high number of indicators, and they are targeting the front runners of the sector, let's face it. And I guess that's why we have relatively few. I can go back. That's why we have this low number here. Because let's face it, most building projects are not front runners. So even if we have some really good projects which are being certified to a very high standard also, there is a big part of the market which is not being targeted by those schemes. So in levels, we are focusing on a few number of indicators. I normally say 2 handfuls. So that means that it should be easier to work with, hopefully. But we will hear about that later on, I believe. It is a voluntary tool, obviously, as well. So levels, we have developed it for two kinds of large groups of buildings. Offices, which were considered important from the outset that we cover, because most buildings which are going through going through assessment already today, they are offices. But also we wanted to cover residential buildings. 70% of the buildings in Europe are residential buildings, so it's really something to target here. Levels has also been developed for targeting new buildings, new build, and major renovation projects. So at least most of the indicators should work also at the stage of renovation. And very important, I think, is that with this we are trying to target the mainstream market. As I said, there are already schemes which are looking at targeting the best performers, the front runners, the really good projects. But with this scheme, we are trying to bring sustainability on a, can I say, more accessible level to the mainstream market. And we have been working very closely with the biggest European certification schemes when we develop levels, so they don't see us as a competitor, but a tool that they can work with themselves as well. Now, just as important as to say what levels is, I think it also is to say what levels is not. Levels is not an EU certification scheme. There is no such thing as levels plus or levels gold or levels fantastic or something like that. Levels is a tool to assess and report on sustainability for buildings with a couple of indicators. And as it is not an EU certification scheme, we are not setting EU benchmarks as well. So for the indicators that we have, we are not saying that a good project should reach this and that. We would be very happy if organizations themselves, or for that matter member states, decide to set certain benchmarks, certain targets in their own policy, but those benchmarks will not come from Europe. And I also want to stress here that even if levels is not a certification scheme, we do believe that we will have a direct impact on certification anyway. And why is that? It is because, as I said, we've been working with the bigger certification schemes in Europe for developing levels. They actually came to us a number of years ago and said, could you, the Commission, please help us to develop a core set of indicators, because we, BREEAM, HQ, DGNB, etc., we would like to have a couple of core indicators which we would all use in the same way. We don't have that today. We cannot compare anything of our results between each other because we do it in different ways. So now they've been involved in this work, and they are now starting to adopt, I should say, the levels indicators in their schemes as well. We see that happening now. So, what are we covering? The first top three here are all related to resource use, and thus directly in one way or the other to environmental impact. So energy over the full life cycle, I want to stress that again. So not only the use phase, but also the very important part, for example, of the energy that is being used when producing the construction materials. And then water, material, and linked to that, of course, the waste and what is being done with the waste. Then I should say that if we had not listened as much as we have to building professionals and stakeholders, we would probably have stopped there. Because in the beginning, we were feeling that, okay, we want to do something related to resource use and environment. But as I will explain a bit later, this process has been very interactive and with big collaboration with building professionals throughout Europe. And they very early on said, well, that's not enough. Then you're just going to have some environmental freaks, as yourselves in DG Environment, thinking it's a good scheme. But you need to include other aspects which are more linked to the quality and the value of the building as well. And together we concluded on those three. So the first one, the jumping man, is supposed to symbolize health and comfort. The other one is resilience to climate change, and then life cycle costing. So those three aspects are included as well. So these are 6 areas in which we have indicators. The benefits, as we wanted it to have when we started, and which we think that we have achieved, and at least that's what all those building professionals that have about 100 of them at least, which have been directly involved in this work, say that levels can provide, are the fact that it is a common language. So it's not a certification scheme. It's a common language with a limited number of indicators. So that means that it should be a relatively simple entry point into something which is quite complex. Buildings is a complex product, and sustainability of buildings throughout the full life cycle. I mean, you could put in hundreds of indicators there if you want to cover everything. But then you're not going to have anyone doing it either. So it's about getting this balance right. So it is for the mainstream market. We are not, I hope that you don't think about this as, okay, yet another initiative which is trying to do the same thing as what many already are doing. We really see this as we've been working together with other initiatives, other schemes, etc. They see us, and that's the point, they see us as complementing their initiatives by providing this common language which they then can use and tap into. So, the timeline. It's funny, I realize now, it's been like this all the time, that what should be at the top is at the bottom. This should be at the top, but I don't mind. I'm just suddenly realizing.
Go down. It will be a little bit up.
Yeah, I can't do it. I can't.
Sorry.
No, it doesn't matter at all. That's funny. Yeah. No, it's not like on my screen myself. Anyway, this is the timeline. We started back in 2011 on working on sustainable buildings at the European Commission. I work at DG Environment, but there are also other DGs which have been very much involved. For example, the quite big team of construction and DG Growth, which some of you may have been in contact with before, called DG Enterprise as well. And we had a communication coming out on that topic in 2014. This idea of developing this kind of a tool that Levels is was sort of repeated in the communication on circular economy, which some of you may have heard of as well. And then from 2015 to 2017 we developed Levels. So we had, I would say, about 100 different stakeholders in different groups supporting this work. And it was really very much, they were steering us and really guiding us on what should be included, what should the scope be, how should we do it, etc. It was not something that the Commission was doing in its corner and then in the end came out and, is it okay? No, it was really going back and forth. And it changed quite a lot, I think, from what we initially planned. But I think this was great because now the response that we get from a big part of the sector is very positive. And I don't think that would have been exactly the same if we hadn't engaged in this discussion. So now, or I should say, so last year we published Levels, meaning a set of indicators with very specific guidance on how to use those indicators. This year we have launched a test phase of Levels because even if we have something which we and and many others think looks nice on paper, we don't know if it's actually working in reality, right? So that's why we set aside 2 years for testing levels on different kinds of testing projects, or building projects. Now, obviously, this is not something that the Commission can do. We cannot test this. We need building projects to test this. Actually until tomorrow? No, until the 30th of September, so that's very soon, yeah? Sunday perhaps. We have, on our website, we have a place where you can register your interest in testing levels on your building project. I'm sure that that can be open a few more weeks if there's anyone interested, a few more weeks to register your building project to test. And then the testing goes on for some time. And then when the test phase is over, in 2021, when we have the results from the testers, and we have most likely had to adjust somehow the work that we've done, we should be able to launch levels with different kinds of implementation support. So the test phase, as I said, which is running now, the objective or the idea there is really to, of course, to make sure that the indicators are robust and that the guidance that we have, which are linked to those, work well. For the Commission, it's also important that we get a good view on the efforts which are needed to use levels, because, as I said, if we want to target the mainstream market, we're not going to come with something which takes an enormous amount of resources and cost, and etc. If that is needed to work with levels the way it looks now, well then we need to change that somehow. Without making it too simplistic, of course, because then it doesn't kill its purpose either. It's also important for us during this test phase to understand what is the support that will be needed to roll this out more widely, and should that support come from the EU, should it come from member states, should it come from building councils, or how will that work? And what are the policy initiatives as well that we need to put in place to make this happen more widely? So if you're testing levels, you can test some of those indicators or all. I think I have one project testing all the indicators, so that's rare. You can use it on ongoing projects or finalized projects where you have some information which would allow you to look at some of the indicators. And if you do that, and if you commit to provide us feedback afterwards, we will supply you with technical support. We don't have financial support, but we have technical support to provide. In the form of technical help desk, a platform for information exchange, and regular webinars. And now we're gradually moving into the following slide, which is the website. I can do a preview. It's the website. So, and you can also see that the next slide is my last slide, so you can relax now. So this slide, which is on the website, it shows some of the stuff that you can find on our website. You can find much more. But for example, you can find on the top here, you can see register to take active part in testing levels. So there you can register if you have a building project that you want to test levels on. But you can also register on the following one, which is if you don't actually want to test, but you want to be able to follow what's happening during this test period and get some information, some newsletter, etc. So that's also an option. And then there are other documents to read below as well. And to conclude, I want you to remember a few things when you leave today, is that levels is not a certification scheme, but it's a common language with a set of indicators. That it covers the full life cycle, that we have developed this together with building professionals, and we are really trying to target the mainstream market with this, so that most kinds of building projects should be able to use levels, or a part of levels. And it is now possible to test.